I was told I would never walk again. I was told to just get back in my wheelchair, that I'd be permanently disabled and never work again. And I was like, that just cannot be my life. But it took me down a very, very dark path. And being able to climb out of that and what I've learned is what I really like to share, because I know a lot of people, might be listening going, well, I can't relate. I've never been hit by an SUV. But I feel like we've all been hit by something, especially in the last couple of years, whether it's our finances, our health, our relationships, and sometimes the confidence is just knocked right out of us. It was for me, because I went from being nicknamed Legs and modeling to completely being scarred from the hip down and deformed.
Welcome back to the Better Human podcast. Today we got Amberly Lago. How you doing?
Hey, I'm awesome. I'm so excited to be talking with you.
Me too. We were just chatting a little bit before we started recording. I told you I was just watching your TED Talk. Awesome. And by the way, for the audience, if you haven't, this is definitely a TED Talk to go check out. Amberly Lago. You'll find her on TEDx, right?
Yeah, TEDx. And I was like shocked. They put it on TED.com, which is a big deal. I was like,
huge.
whoa.
Well, you got what I think it's like 200,000 views or close to it right now.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Now, if I would have known that I was going to have that many views on a talk that I was given, I would have been even more scared than I already was. That was my first big talk on a stage.
Really? So speaking wasn't, or that was just the biggest stage that you had done at that point?
The biggest stage, and I had never done a talk like that. And TED Talk is just so different than any other talk, and they're like, okay, you've got 16 minutes to share the most important message of your life. Don't talk about God and don't talk about, your accident too much. And I was like, okay, that was the advice I had. And then they said a week before, they're like, no, actually, we've got one more speaker, so you need to shorten your talk to 14 minutes. And I've learned, it's good to be able to change things up, be resilient, be flexible. But yeah, that was one of the best experiences of my life. That was a dream come true.
It's amazing. And, well, you were awesome.
Thank you. Can I tell you how I got that? How I was able? Somebody, a curator, had been following me on Instagram for a year. And they weren't just looking at the content that I was putting out there. They were actually looking at the way that I responded to people. And they sent me a DM on Instagram, and I thought, this can't be real, And then I was like, yeah, I'd love to. Here's my email. And she emailed me, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is actually legit. And I was the only speaker that didn't have a PhD. And my husband was like, you're the only one that doesn't have a bunch of initials after your name. And so I messaged her. I said, hey, do you think, I'm not trying to promote my book or anything, because I know that's not what a TED Talk is about, but do you think we could put that I'm an author or anything else after, my name? And she goes, are you feeling self-conscious about this? And I was like, well, yeah, a little bit. She said, well, you know what? You have a PhD in heart, and that's why we're having you speak at our event. And that shifted everything. And sometimes I think that's what we need, somebody to just believe in us or speak truth or light and love into us for us to start to believe in ourselves. And that really changed things for me. So I always think, okay, I've got a PhD in heart.
You sure do. And, on that point, you talk a lot about resilience, and, part of resilience is, being flexible and fluid. That's what you're talking about as well. But it's also being able to expand your perspective, right? And that's what you just described, which is sometimes it requires other people to say something or to ask us that question, or to be like, hey, by the way, this is the way I see it. And it's so important. And that's where, thinking about the people we surround ourselves with is part of this as well. For the audience, I'd love to start with your story. It's an incredible story. And I think it's what began a lot of your work. So can you tell us the story?
Yeah. Well, my life was so different 12 years ago. I was in the fitness industry, and I was doing infomercials and in Shape magazine and Health magazine, sponsored by Nike, loved what I did, and everything changed in the blink of an eye. I ran my best in my best time that day, 11 miles. I was an avid runner. I loved fitness. And on my way home on my motorcycle, I was cruising down Ventura Boulevard, and this car shot out of a parking lot. As a motorcyclist, you drive kind of defensively. You try to make sure everybody sees you. And I really thought he saw me. And I was like, oh my gosh, he does not see me. I tried to jump off my motorcycle. It was too late. I got T-boned. I was thrown 30 feet. And then I was just sliding across the asphalt. And when I finally came to a stop, I looked down at my leg and it was just crumbled into pieces and there was blood everywhere. I didn't know it at the time, but my femoral artery was actually severed. Thankfully, there happened to be first responders, firefighters, and an ambulance like right down the street. Like they were having coffee at Coffee Bean and they took off running towards me before they even got the 911 call. That saved my life. Them being so close. There was also a stranger that made a tourniquet around my leg, and I was rushed to the hospital and put in induced coma. And the first thing that I learned when I woke up out of a coma was I had a 1% chance of saving my leg from amputation. And it took a whole lot of grit. It took, by the grace of God, and 34 surgeries, they were able to save my leg. And I really thought the worst was over, being an athlete. I was like, you just eat healthy, you train hard. It's going to take time, but I'm going to heal. And I went in for a doctor's checkup, and I thought he was going to be so proud of me because I was upright on my crutches because I had been bedridden for so long. And when I went in to see him, he examined me and diagnosed me with complex regional pain syndrome, which is dubbed the suicide disease because it's ranked highest on the pain scale. And there's apparently no known cure yet. Yeah. And I was told
it's a nerve disease.
It's a nerve disease. It's like where your nerves, your sympathetic nervous system is all out of whack. So there's a constant loop of pain. You're overly sensitive to touch or pressure. Some people can't even fly on airplanes. Most people don't walk. And I was told I would never walk again. I was told to just get back in my wheelchair, that I'd be permanently disabled, and never work again. And I was like, that just cannot be my life.
Right.
But it took me down a very, very dark path, and being able to climb out of that. And what I've learned is what I really like to share, because I know a lot of people, might be listening going, well, I can't relate. I've never been hit by an SUV. But I feel like we've all been hit by something, especially in the last couple of years, whether it's our finances, our health, our relationships. And sometimes the confidence is just knocked right out of us. It was for me, because I went from being nicknamed Legs and modeling to completely being scarred from the hip down and deformed.
Yeah. And back to it with the 1% chance of keeping your leg. What was that conversation with the doctor? I mean, when they came and said, listen, there's a 1% chance, was your position of like, just, tell me what's going to happen? Or did you
I was kind of like,
be like, hell no, you're going to do what you need to do in order to save the leg?
You know what my first thought was? And this might call me crazy, but I was like, so you're saying there's a chance?
Right.
I'll take that 1% chance. And that is all I focused on, was you said there was a chance. It may only be 1%, but I am going to find a doctor who's willing to take that chance with me. And let me tell you, we had to pull a lot of strings, call in a lot of favors, because we had to sign, my husband signed papers and said to the orthopedic, that the surgeon that was going to amputate, said, you're not touching her. She's keeping her leg. And we found a doctor, Dr. Don Wiss, who was willing to try to save it. And so I got transferred to another hospital. That was the longest ride of my life, riding in the back of that ambulance. And they had to ride very slow and take their time getting there, because my leg was held together by all these like rods that were sticking, and my leg was so crumbled into pieces that it wasn't like they could just, put a cast on it and you're good. It was like they had sewn my femoral artery back together. And there was like, I had a couple of days to start getting this repaired, or the bone ends up dying off and I was going to lose my leg.
Right. Wow. To just share a story. There's a guy I know, his name is Paul Templar, South African guy, and he was taking out a group on safari, and they were on a boat, and hippos are very dangerous in South Africa or Africa, right? And people don't realize how fast and intense they could be. Anyway, fast forward this whole story. A hippo attacked the boat and knocked someone out the boat, and he jumped in the water to rescue this guy, pulled him out. I think he pulled him out and got him out, but was mauled by the hippo instead, and ended up with like 75 puncture wounds. And they were going to amputate both arms and both legs because the doctor said, like, there's just nothing we can do. And he was lying on the bed, told me the story. He was like, I looked at the doctor and he said, I need you to focus on saving it. If there's a 1% chance, I would rather you take that chance than just go straight for the ambulance. Anyway, he ended up losing one arm, but saved both legs and the other. And, as I was listening to you tell that story, I mean, I instantly thought about Paul, and, just part of the mindset and part of our own sort of, ability to heal is the importance of focusing on the 1%, the importance of saying, like, you know what, yeah, I'll take that, right? Because most people focus on the 99. And, we early days when we came to Costa Rica, we ended up with COVID, me and my wife and kids. It was a bad COVID. But I'll never forget this woman I know. She was a very sweet neighbor. She'd come over and she'd bring us juice. And one day she walked in and she said, Greg, I need you to tell yourself that you're going to heal. I need you to be focused on the success of the healing, not the I'm being sick. Because I'm looking at you right now and you've got 2 young kids and a young wife. And, your mind is going to be a massive part in healing. And, that's just a small story. But, back to yours, which is, do you believe that part of your healing had 99% to do with your mindset and focusing on that 1%?
Absolutely. And I'm so glad you asked that because, so I had a lot of, people that were really upset with me. And I had, for the first time in my life, had these haters that came out of the woodwork because I was on the doctor's TV. They wanted to have me on. A producer had seen me speak at this event, and she came up to me after the event and said, hey, I'm a producer of the doctors and I'd love to have you on the doctors. And so that's how I got on the doctor's TV. And when they interviewed me, they asked me all these different treatments that I did to get through the CRPS. And I was like, I've done ketamine infusions, a spinal stimulator, Eastern, Western medicine. At one point, I was on 73 homeopathic pills, 11 prescription medications, and nothing was working except for I shifted my mindset and I started really focusing on my mindset. And that's what helps me get through the pain. Well, they edited out that part of all the different things that I had tried. And they just said, woman gets through pain with her mindset. And, people that have complex regional pain syndrome were so mad. They were like, you can't get through this disease or this disorder with your mind. And I'm like, but that's how I do it because that's what I've had to do because nothing else was working for me. Now it's more than just the mindset. It's what I eat. It's how I exercise. It's the people that I hang around. But it starts with the mindset. And if I would have laid in that bed, and look, a lot of people would have been like, I don't blame her for giving up, man. That sucks. That's hard dealing with that much pain and, losing your career and being in debt. I mean, we had $2.9 million worth of medical expenses. So a lot of people would have understood if I just gave up and just threw in the towel and just did nothing. And I had to really get a hold of my mindset, and what helped me the most do that. And I could instantly feel the shift from going down this road of despair and self-pity and depression and just negativity was I got grateful. And I know that seems so super simple, but I remember laying in the hospital bed and thinking, oh my gosh, what if I never walk again? What if tomorrow's the day they're going to amputate my leg? What if I die? What if, what if I can't run? What if I can't work? What if my husband doesn't love me? And I was just like sinking down into really a dark place.
That's a
And
depressive state.
yeah, I was like, I got to stop here and I got to focus on what I do have and what I can do and get grateful. And so I just really started writing down everything that I was grateful for, that I was alive, that I did have family, that I had great doctors and nurses, that I had my own hospital room. I didn't have to, share a hospital room with anybody. That I had my own little mini fridge, and it's something that I still practice every day. And I not only practice it, I share it. And I have two different groups that like I have my God Squad. We text each other 10 things we're grateful for every day. And I have some other women that I sponsor and mentor, and we have a gratitude practice, and it keeps us accountable. And, I end my day with snuggling with my youngest daughter and saying, hey, what's the best thing that happened to you today? And what's one thing that you're grateful for? Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's silly answers, but our kids really see what we do. They are paying attention. And it really hit me that she does have this attitude of gratitude when her and I were both hit by a car and we were being dismissed, we were released from the hospital and kind of limping out.
Another car accident. You were in the car with your daughter and you got another.
Well, we were actually on scooters, the little razors. Going through a crosswalk, and this car came flying through the crosswalk, hit us both. That was scarier than my motorcycle accident, knowing that.
How old was your daughter at the time?
Oh gosh, this was during COVID. She was 13. And, California was locked down. I mean, everything was like shut down. So every day we would go on a scooter, on our razors, or we'd ride our bicycles, and we were on our razors, and the sky, flew through the crosswalk, hit us both. I jumped out. I stopped, put my arm out. By the way, that doesn't stop a flying car from coming, but that was like my first instinct, was to try to stop it from hitting her. And luckily, I think that helped, because when he hit me, he slammed on the brakes. And so we were both thrown and not rolled over. But that moment where I couldn't see her and I didn't know if the car was going to be on top of her, it was just, as a mother, the most terrifying moment. And luckily, it was hard to get any, it was the one time I left the house without my phone. And trying to flag somebody down when you've got blood all over you, and we didn't have a mask on. When in California, everybody wore a mask, even to go outside and go for a walk. Finally, someone came over.
We know masking well.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, just on that note, how long did it take for someone to come up and help?
I was trying to flag people down. The guy that hit us didn't have a phone. My daughter was screaming. I had carried her out of the street. It seemed like it took forever because cars were just driving past us. Finally, maybe 5 minutes go by, which seemed like hours. A lady that was in a house came out and let me use her cell phone. And I called, I told people to call 911, and I called my husband and he came. But when we were in the hospital, the lady that shared the room in the ER that was packed because COVID, it was the beginning of COVID, and it was just packed. And she let us share a hospital bed. And the lady next to us was not nice at all. And she was mean and rude to the doctors and nurses. And my daughter and I, every time they came over, I was like, thank you so much for helping us. I know this could be so much worse. We appreciate all that you're doing and your service, and you taking care of so many with COVID. Just thank you so much. And she's like, hey, we are going to take care of you. We're going to get a CAT scan for your daughter, and hopefully we'll get you out of here really quick. And I think because we were so grateful and so appreciative, they were coming over, bringing us crackers and juice and snack. And they got us out of that hospital like 5 hours later. That lady They weren't helping her, but we were so grateful. And when we walked out of the hospital, this is where the gratitude is key. My daughter she could have played the victim. She could have been complaining. She walked out. She said, Mama, we were rolled into this hospital on a gurney and we are walking out like rock stars. And I was like, yes, girl, you are the victor of your life. We are walking. There is so much to be grateful for. And that's when it hit me that those moments where I'm like, let's focus on what we're grateful for. She gets it. That's who she is. She is resilient. And so those little things, I think we need to work on our gratitude practice and strengthen our resilience before we actually need it.
Right. And I'm assuming there were no injuries or minor injuries.
I mean, oh boy,
like getting hit by a car, like Jesus.
The next day, bless her heart, she was her back is still a little messed up from it. We had to go to chiropractor for physical therapy for a while. The next day it broke my heart because she was in so much pain. She was just crying in bed. We were both she was real scraped up. Her whole back had road rash on it. We were sore. The worst that happened to me, you don't realize how much you use your thumbs until you can't use it. When I'd put my hand out to stop the car, the capsule in my thumb joint burst. So I could not for almost a year, that thumb, just to button your pants, to pull up your pants, the little things.
Tiny things.
Crazy.
I broke my hand last year just on the thumb, coincidentally, and had a cast. And the tiny things, tying shoes, doing a button up,
typing,
opposable thumbs. They actually, there's a point to them.
Yes. I appreciate it more than ever now.
Right. I'm listening to a story, and this is one of these interviews where I don't have a lot of questions. It's just like your story is just incredible. But I'm hearing your message throughout, which is mindset is really important, right? Which is part of your healing process, and not just physical healing, emotional healing and mental healing and relational healing. And, even when we end up in some of these conflicts, right? Being able to shift our mindset around that relationship, that person, that situation is step one. Right? That attitude, that mindset, because if we don't shift that, the behavior doesn't follow, the actions don't follow. Gratitude. And I love what you were talking about, which is not going at this alone. You've got a group that holds you accountable for this.
Oh man, I tried doing it alone and it just didn't work.
Yeah. There's a great saying that says, if you want to go fast, I've been using this tons lately. If you want to go fast, you go by yourself. If you want to go far, you go with a team. Right.
Mm-hmm.
The more I lean into the work that I do, and you're in the similar industry and similar work, the more I recognize the importance of a village, the community.
Oh yeah. And that was something that I learned through this whole process, because I grew up where I had to be really strong. I mean, and being an athlete with a coach that was like a drill sergeant, and being a dancer where it didn't matter. You just show up, you push through pain, you suck it up, basically. And so I spent a long time just trying to suck it up, which really meant that I was had exhausted all avenues and felt like I solely had to rely on myself. And what I realized is suck it up doesn't work, in fact. And I was trying to push through pain. I was not listening to myself. I wasn't listening to others. I wasn't connecting. I didn't want others to know that I was in pain or that I had shame, how miserable I felt. So I kept up on the outside trying to pretend like everything was okay, but on the inside I was dying. And that led me to creating some really bad habits. And it wasn't until I took radical acceptance and really admitted to myself what are the things that weren't working for me, that I could start to go, okay, how's that working for you? I was like, well, this isn't really helping me. In fact, it's hurting me. I've got to do something about it. And it was so hard to admit and then ask for help, but it changed my life. And I think it's so important if you're struggling, and it doesn't matter what you're going through. I mean, new levels, new devils, right? Like it's so important to have a tribe of people that you can lean on, that you can talk to. You know, I had one of the ladies that's in my mastermind reach out today, and she said, you know, Ben, and she's a very, I mean, really successful coach. She makes, you know, $1 million on her coaching business a year. And she's like, you know, sometimes it can be very isolating when you reach a certain level of success. And I'm like, yeah, but we aren't meant to do things alone. We aren't meant to do hard things alone. I think that we're meant for connection. And I felt like sometimes I didn't want to share my vulnerability or things that were really hard. But what I realized is by sharing things that, you know, my vulnerability, my things that I used to try to hide, it's like, oh my gosh, that's what has led me to deeper connections with others.
Right.
Whether it's my sobriety or my scars or hard things that I'm doing in business where I'm like, oh yeah, you know, my first thing I ever tried to launch, it crashed, it sucked, nobody bought it, you know, but this is what I learned from it. And when I can teach what I've learned, whether it's how to get through pain or how to do things in business or whatever that may be, or how I stay sober, it's like, wow, then you make meaningful relationships and it's so much more fun. And the journey is so much more fun when you get to connect with others who are doing similar things, who are like-minded. And so, yeah, I think that it's so important. Connection is key. I think that proximity is power. And there's something else I learned that so important when you're trying to build anything is to seek counsel and not opinion. So meaning when I first started out, like, don't ask people how to do something who have never done what you want to do. Go to somebody. If you want to write a book, go to somebody who's written a best-selling book and say, how'd you do it? That was my big mistake. Cause I remember when I first started, you know, I was like, I'm going to write a book. I started asking people and they're like, you're the fitness girl. You don't even own a computer. You never went to college. You're not smart enough. Like some of the things I heard. And I was like, no, I'm going to write a book. I need to go ask somebody who's written a book, and then they could guide me. And so that was something that I learned in the beginning when you're seeking counsel, not opinion, when you're building your community.
I love that. Love what you talk about with community, right? And connection. You can't have connection without stories and sharing and letting people inside. And you described it as vulnerability. Yeah, you know, vulnerability builds deep connection, right? I don't think you could have trust without that. The other side, it's amazing that when you ask people for help, right, how people show up and help.
Mm-hmm.
And I love your line, which is, you know, don't seek counsel, not opinion. It's so true. I was talking about this earlier where I said, you know, the danger in the industry that we're in right now is there's a lot of junk out there. There's a lot of opinions. It's a lot of everyone sharing, like, here's your 3 steps to, you know, magically be happy, have a mindset, be confident, be cool, be successful. And it's, you know, it's very important to sift through that and to recognize or to operate with a little more stringent, being a little more stringent when it comes down to seeking that guidance and advice, you know?
Yeah. And to have somebody that you can trust. I mean, I just got off of a call with one of the ladies that I coach yesterday, and she's like, hey, she goes, I just got an offer to speak on this stage. And, you know, she named off all these big names that were going to be speakers there. And I said, well, that's great. She goes, but they are charging me $35,000. And I was like, absolutely not. Like,
right.
No. And these are your reasons why you're not going to do that. Like I mean,
she's going to pay to go and be a speaker.
She's going to pay $35,000 to get on that stage. I said, first of all, I was like, I've already put you on stage at my last event. You're an incredible speaker. I'm putting you on stage again for my next event. I was like, you're going to do this. I said, but that's what, unless you just have a lot of money growing on trees out there, and but $35,000, like, what are you going to get from that?
Yeah.
If you're just getting video, then you know what? You're better off hiring a videographer. Go get yourself a stage and practice doing a talk on a stage that you've rented for $1,000.
Right. And to that point, there's the example of good advice and having the importance of network. But, the ultimate thing to this is if she does that, she'll never be a speaker. She'll never get paid. Right. Like,
what that does to your self-confidence.
Correct.
Like,
but even just your value. I mean, I knew early days of speaker, like, it's like, even when I was like early days in speaking, I was like, we still have to charge. People were like, oh, come do it for free. And there's a little bit of like, well, okay, well, let's just do this one and this one. And the next thing you know, all of them are for free and you're not getting good gigs. And the second you charge, right? One, as you said, your confidence goes up. But there's value to this, right? Charge well, charge appropriately, but make sure you charge, specifically as a speaker. Very important.
Yeah. And you know what? I just interviewed Dr. Joe Vitale. Do you know him?
Yeah.
He is an awesome guy. I'm telling you, I was interviewing him for my podcast and I felt like it was an hour of free coaching for me. I was asking him all the questions, he was amazing. And he said that when he started speaking, something he had read the book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. He had read all the books. And he had a friend that gave him some advice and said, when you're going to go do a speaking gig, you need to fly first class. You need to say you want this, and this, and put it in the contract. And he said, it took me a while. He said, but in the contract, I said, I wanted a first class ticket. And I was like, oh my goodness. I said, I can't believe you're saying this. I said, because I was just asked to go speak at an event and it's in Miami. And I said, and I will need you to cover my airfare. I wasn't even asking first class. I'm like, just pay the airfare, and I was like, I'll get whatever ticket just to get there and my hotel. And they're like, oh, we usually don't cover the speaker's airfare and hotel. And I was like, well, I'm not going to fly across country unless you cover. Why should, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you know what? So they covered it.
All of a sudden, magically, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's amazing.
But I got to a point where I was like, to leave my family, like family time is so important and your energy is everything and everything is energy. And I don't even think of it really as the money. I'm not like driven by money. I'm driven by impact, but I also think about the amount of energy that it's going to take for me to fly. And I have to admit, having complex regional pain syndrome, it is a little harder sometimes to fly. I hate to admit that or even say it out loud, but it is hard. I have to really, really build up my immunity and rest and get there a day early so I can let the flare up kind of calm down from being on the plane because it does cause some pain usually. And so, but it's interesting how once you start saying, no, this is what I charge. This is what I have worked so hard. This is my worth.
Right.
So,
the energy it's going to take you to give of yourself into that room, to move, to make an impact, to teach, to share. It's a lot. I would come home from gigs and, my wife would early days, she'd be like, you come home and you crash. Like right. And, at first it would create a little bit of conflict, but eventually she'd be like, I get it. The amount of energy you extend for 2-3 days at these events, you need to rest, you need to recoup. I wanted to switch gears and just learn a little more about your day-to-day life with the disease. So how does it affect you daily and what are you doing to manage it?
Well, it's interesting. My doctor out here in Texas, one of the reasons we didn't want to move out of California is because I had such an incredible team of doctors that had been with me. And it was like, oh, I don't know if I want to leave my doctors. And it took a while to find doctors out here, but I have, a pain management team that I go to. But the moment that I wake up and I take my first step out of bed, I'm immediately in pain. Sometimes I'm in pain before my feet hit the floor. And if I didn't immediately go to gratitude and prayer, And thank you for letting me walk. I'm not stuck in a hospital bed anymore. Thank you for allowing me to walk, even though I'm walking like I'm 150 years old today, So I immediately shift my mindset with gratitude. I do things from the moment I wake up it's like I've got smart feet. I don't even think about it. Actually, I go straight to the kitchen. I drink my gut health drink. I have my morning routine before I look at any devices, before I check email or anything. I need to get grounded and get my mindset right. So I may journal a little bit. I usually read out of some of my favorite books. Like this is one of them. You can tell it's loved on pretty good.
That is a loved read book, right? For the audience,
it is.
that
It's
a
very
padded up book.
it is very loved. I journal a little bit, and then I move my body. I think that when you move your body, it moves your mood. And let me tell you, there are days when, people think, oh, you're always so positive and you're always so motivated. And I'm like, no, I'm actually not. I work on things to be positive with affirmations. I've learned to talk to myself instead of listen to myself, because I have this inner critic that is loud and mean, and it'll tell me, oh my gosh, you're not good enough. You're in pain. You should just lay down. You should just throw in the towel. Who do you think you are? Like, it's mean. So I've learned to really talk to myself. Even this morning in the gym, before I walked into the gym, I'm in the car scrolling through Instagram, and I'm like, Amberly, get your butt out of this car, get off social media, get into that gym, go work out. You're going to feel better. And I do, because, when you move your body, it releases endorphins that actually combat pain. It releases these natural chemicals that make you feel good. It boosts your confidence. And so I used to move my body when I was younger because I wanted to look good. Now I'm like, no, I move my body because I want to feel good.
Feel good.
Yeah. And so it's, eating healthy. It's so many things throughout the day. And it's reaching out to people as well to see how they're doing, because I can easily get stuck in my own little bubble of a world, like my own to-do list, and start feeling like overwhelmed, or even sometimes get in that comparison trap of, oh man, they're doing more than me, or why wasn't I hired for that gig? Or, oh, I should, and it's like, no, I need to focus on what I do have and what I can do, and reach out to somebody and see how I can be of service to them.
I love your discipline in mindset. It's, and for the audience, just so I could paraphrase or share what my thoughts are. Mindset is not this easy thing that you wake up and you think and there it is. It's counterbalancing that little voice in our head. And we've all, as you said, we've all got that critic. We've all got that voice in our head. I like to tell people, we've got this wonderful ability to build up these stories and mental models and beliefs in our head, all through just sort of what we're listening to and receiving. And if we don't counterbalance that, if we don't talk to it, if we don't challenge it, it can be overwhelming and then become very real. I talk a lot about how perceptions will equal fact. This is what you start to, and before you know it, that negative thought, it's toxic, picks up another one. It's like spiral thinking and just goes down this rabbit hole. And often when, I'm working with people, I'll say, the exercise here is just to catch it. So there it is. I'm doing it again. And now we can take the action of counterbalance and reframing. And reframing isn't going from negative to positive all the time. It's not just transferring all your negative challenges and thoughts into warm, fuzzy ones. It's speaking differently. It's like, Amberly, get your ass out the car, get into the gym right now, right? Hey, remind yourself that, you're grateful for just being here and going through that. And like anything, like motivation isn't going to do it for us. Waking up to be motivated to work out, being motivated to get off Instagram, being motivated to do something. I don't believe that actually exists. I believe telling ourselves, talking to ourselves, doing it, moving our body, taking the action. Now we're motivated, right? We're on the treadmill, we're in the gym. Now we've got wind in the sails. Now the rhythm and the momentum and the motivation is there. And this motivation sort of like, I got to be motivated in order to take action or be motivated to be inspired. It's a myth. It's actually the opposite. I need to create inspiration in order to be motivated. I need to take action in order to be motivated. So I love your discipline on mindset. Let's talk a little bit about resilience. So by definition, you are resilient, right? We've spoken about some of the things that contribute to that, which is your gratitude exercises and mindsets and network, and making sure that you're supporting your group. I love what you spoke about before, which is call a friend, pick up the phone and call someone. Right? It's I have a list actually I'm keeping every day. I try to call someone and I write the name down.
Oh, that's awesome.
And I think, because sometimes you get caught up just calling the same people, right? Well, let me just call Amberly today. Oh, I haven't spoken to anyone. Let me call Amberly. And I look at my book and I'm like, oh, I've already called her. Who else can I call?
Oh, that's really good.
How to build the list. What are some other practices or things that we could suggest, or you would suggest for people when it comes down to resilience?
Well, I want to go back to what you said about writing people's names down that you've called. That's so good. I just told my community, I was like, okay, your exercise for this week is to write down 100 names of people that you really want to build a relationship and get to know. And your goal in the next couple of months is to reach out some way, somehow, and connect with those people. So I love that you write the name down. So I'm going to start writing the names down.
Do it.
But yes, resilience, I do think it starts with your mindset. I think that there's something that I use every single day. And it came about actually because my husband had told me, we were sitting at the dinner table and I guess I looked pretty haggard. I had my leg propped up on the table, homework papers scattered everywhere. My eyes were pretty bloodshot from being so exhausted. And he looked at me and he was like, oh my gosh, you need to pace yourself. And I was pretty offended actually, because I'm like, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm type A. I got grit. I am not, that means slow down, like God forbid, slow down. And I had to make pacing myself a win-win. And so instead of like using all my energy to suck it up, I was like, I am going to use my energy and focus on pacing being more of like taking things in stride. And so how I do that mentally, physically, spiritually is I need something quick. I need something, a reminder to remind me what is wrong with you. Like what, like I'll ask, what's going on? What have I left out? Why am I tired? Why am I feeling sad? Why am I feeling anxious? What am I missing out on? And so I created PACER, which stands for perspective, acceptance, community, endurance, and rest. And perspective, we've already talked about how sometimes others can shift your perspective. You can shift your own perspective with gratitude. And I think it's the quickest and easiest way to feel better about your situation or your circumstances is to instantly go, okay, what am I grateful for? It might be really tough, but there's always a blessing and a challenge. And if we ask ourselves, okay, instead of why me, ask what's next? What can I do? And gratitude really allows you to do that. And gratitude really turned my denial into acceptance. And I think that that's the next part of PACER. And it's the beginning of any transformation is really like admitting what is going on. Who are you? What are your habits? How's it working for you? Is it hurting you or is it helping you? And it was really, really hard for me. After my accident, I started drinking to try to cope with the pain because nothing was working. I didn't have the right mindset. And it took me taking radical acceptance of, I got a problem with alcohol for me to go, I need help and for me to get sober. And so I think whether it's accepting where you are in your health journey, where you are in your business, maybe it's in your relationship, the first step is like taking a good hard look at your life. And that will lead you to the right community. And that's the next part of PACER. And we've talked so much about community and connection. And look, I could not stay sober if I didn't have a sober community. I would not want to be on this entrepreneurial journey if I didn't have a group of women. I have an Unstoppable Life mastermind, and it's women who we are there to cheer each other on. We're there to, we get in the opportunity chair and we state our challenge and then we offer solutions because it takes endurance. in life, whether you're a mom home chasing kids around the house, or dad that, my husband's, he's the stay-at-home dad, and I'm the entrepreneur, or whether it's, in your fitness goals, it takes endurance. And I think that's where your passion and your perseverance come into play. That is where you focus on your why to get through the hows. That is where you get gritty. And I think that, grit without connection just feels like resistance. It feels like clawing your way to the top, like you're in quicksand. It's hitting roadblocks or even hitting rock bottom. But grit with connection is where you find your true resilience. And then the last part of Pacer, which is the hardest part for me, is rest, which I really had to make this a part of my business strategy. And I had to make it like a goal. Like, I love goals, and I love like, okay, what can I do to reach that goal? And I even wear a ring that measures my sleep. Yeah. And when it tells me good, or sometimes it says pay attention, like you've not slept well, you're not getting deep sleep, whatever it is. But I've really made rest a part of my business strategy, because when we are rested, we can be resilient. When we recover, we can be resilient. And, I schedule out times in my day, and sometimes we have to strategically stop and plan out times to rest and recover. But that's how we can think better. That's how we can do better. And I think that our impact is only as strong as we are healthy.
I totally agree. I'm a big supporter of rest and sleep. And, there's more and more studies out there. And, look, you're an athlete, this, an athlete trains. And then there's a restoration period, right? Where you don't go and train really hard before the big competition, right? You rest, and afterwards as well. It's super important for high performance, right? I love Pacer. It's awesome. What an awesome acronym. Perspective.
Oh, thank you.
Acceptance, community, endurance, which is like, keep it going, and rest. Cool. Very cool. By definition, this is your brand, true grit and grace. Right? And that's your podcast as well, right?
Yeah. I did not know I'd written my book, and I was like, I don't know what I'm going to call my book. I had no idea. And my editor was like, you know what? It'll come to you. You'll be walking, or you'll hear something, or you'll wake up and you'll drink something, it'll come to you. And so one day I was going to the barn. My daughter's a horseback rider, and I walked up to the barn, and on social media that day, I'd posted the x-ray of my leg, and it's like got rods and plates and screws everywhere. And it took 2 years for the bone to completely grow back together. There was a non-union, and they were almost to the point where they thought they were going to take a bone from my hip to put in my leg. And I was like, I'm going to do everything I can to get this sucker to grow back together. And I was wearing a bone stimulator. I was lifting weights. I was like doing whatever I could. And finally, after 2 years, it grew back together. So I'd posted on Instagram, like, good news, I don't have to have that surgery. It grew together. And when I walked up to the barn, this other mom at the barn looked at me and she said, oh my goodness, you have got true grit and grace, girl. And I said, oh, can I name my book that? And she goes, you're welcome. And I'm like, that's it. It's going to be called True Grit and Grace. And so that's where the name came from. And then it just kind of stuck, because I do think it takes a lot of grit to get through a lot of challenges, but it also takes, for me, giving ourselves grace. And for me also, it has been the grace of God that has gotten me through so much.
Amazing. Amberly, thank you so much for coming and sharing your story today, and your thoughts and your perspective, and, just the way you go about it. So powerful. Thank you.
Oh, you're amazing. Thank you so much for having me on your show. I really want to go and hang out with you. So I think
we're gonna create some time for that, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Let me ask you, actually, before I ask you the final question, let's drop some of your links and stuff. So the podcast is called True Grit and Grace. Your book is called True Grit and Grace. Where else can people come and find you and get in touch with you and get more of some of this magic that Amberly Lago has?
Oh, you're so awesome. Well, you know what? I have created, like, I want people to be able to implement this pacer methodology into their life, whether they're going through a challenge or feeling kind of blue or anxious or whatever it may be. So if you text me the word grit, just text the word grit, GRIT, to 818-214-7378. You'll get a free downloadable playbook that I've created. But you can find me at amberlylago.com. I hang out on Instagram mostly at Amberly Lago Motivation. But yeah, I want them to tune into True Grit and Grace to hear your episode, because I can't wait to have you on my podcast. You're amazing.
Well, thank you. I'm very much looking forward to that, and we'll have to get that scheduled sooner than later. But I know you're taking a break, back to rest. You're living the pacer, right? You've been going at it for 3 years, and it's not that you're not going to go, but you're going to restore a little bit. You're going to take the summer off and you're going to rest. So love
this is the first time ever like that. I talked to my producer and she was like, Amberly, I think this is a great idea. She said, because a podcast is like a marathon. I mean, I got to be a top 1% podcast, but it is. People said, oh, it's a lot of work. I'm like, I got grit. I could do this. It is a lot of work. I mean, I love it, but it's a lot of work. And so my producer was like, yeah, I think you need to record a solo cast and share with your audience that you are actually going to rest.
That's amazing. That's amazing. At the end of the episode, we come to the most important question, which is, what do you think we all need to do to be better humans tomorrow?
That's such a great question. To be better
humans tomorrow.
Be better humans tomorrow. I think that if we do our best to be kind. I mean, kindness goes so far. And I think, I've had people ask me how I've achieved certain things. And I'm like, you know what? I just see how I can reach out and be of service to others and genuinely want to help them in some way. So I think that if we can just work on like really how to be kinder as a person, like how can you walk down the street and smile and say hello to someone? How can you reach out to somebody and see how you can help them? And so I think that's what I would suggest.
Awesome. Love it. Love it. Love it. We all need to be kinder. I totally agree with that. To the audience, go follow Amberly Lago. We got all her links and handles that will be dropped in the show notes. But once again, Amberly Lago Motivation, and Lago is spelled Lago. Motivation, and you'll find her. If you're following me, you can go and find her that way as well. Amberly, you're amazing. You're a superstar. You are one of the true thought leaders, and the world needs more individuals like you out there. Thank you again for being here. To the audience, if you like today's episode, don't forget to like, don't forget to subscribe, don't forget to share, and we will see you next week.